to God. He talks about he bore our sins on the cross. And that word cross is not, according to the Truth for Today, it's not the same word that is the wooden cross that he was. It would be like the word for tree. And in Deuteronomy, it says, cursed is he who hangs on a tree. And it comes from the idea that when they punish somebody, there was capital punishment. How were they typically put to death in the Old Testament? They were stoned. That was the typical way. So they weren't put on the cross to kill them, but they were put on the tree and hung on the tree to show everybody else. Even pagan governments did that. If you think of the cross and you think of what the Romans would do when there was opposition, they would hang a lot of people on their cross and let them hang there. Why? Because this is what's going to happen to you. This is cursed is the one who hangs on a tree. And that is exactly what Jesus experienced. He was cursed. He took our sins and he was hung on the tree for us to see him so that we would learn from his example. Any other comments? Yep.
Well, I was just thinking that the verse there that he did not revile in return. That's hard.
Oh, it's very hard.
That's hard. I mean, I usually got a quick answer, and that's not what we're supposed to do.
Yes.
I mean, and like Proverbs 15:1 says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. So there's, of course Jesus knew, but there was really nothing he could say that would have helped the situation,
Yeah.
He was going to go to the cross, but a soft answer would be the answer if we were going to.
Yes. And
it's almost like, when Jesus prayed to God, don't let me go through this, it's almost like he's going to go through.
exactly. It's true. It's like, I don't want to go through this. He didn't want to go through it any more than we want to suffer in this life because we're Christian. But we do so in a submissive attitude. Rusty.
If you want to get nana, you could probably say that Jesus wasn't a very smart fellow when he called those Pharisees a brood of vipers. But he was trying to show them that you don't mess around with God or his son.
He was teaching them that their attitude toward the scriptures was totally wrong.
Yep.
So he spoke against it. But he certainly didn't do it to get at them. He did it to try to teach them.
Mm-hmm.
We've got it so easy compared to over there where you say the wrong word and they touch your head off.
Yeah, exactly.
And with a live TV going.
Oh yeah, there are Christians in the world today who face true persecution, even death.
You say you're not a believer, or you say you are, and when you say you are, that's it. That's
Yeah.
your last words.
Yeah. And that's where we entrust ourselves, body and soul, to God. And it demonstrates true faith in God. And he concludes this talking about Jesus, I forget what your version said, but mine says the shepherd and guardian of our souls. And that is the leadership that God expects from the church, is a shepherd and a guardian. That word guardian, according to Truth for Today, is the same as overseer. Where do we hear the term shepherd and overseer? Elders. And those two words, the overseer is bishop, shepherd is pastor. That is how God expects leadership to be in his church. Humble, subservient, not getting their own way. We don't think of a leader in this world of not getting their own way. like him or not, our president is not shy in trying to get things his own way. But that's not the leadership that God pictures for his church. The pastor, shepherd, that is Jimmy and Gary and Stan and Steve, do they lord it over this congregation? We're very fortunate. They're humble men, and they don't insist on their own way. That is the leadership that God expects. Yes, Rusty?
When you were talking about your version, were you referring to me?
Yeah, yours, I was saying when you read it, it read just slightly different than
Yeah.
the New American Standard.
Well,
Was your what words in the last chapter? Read 25 for us.
it says, for you were straying like sheep, but have now returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls.
Overseer. That's the same word that you use there. And that's the word where we get bishop.
And that overseer is capitalized.
You what? Yours has bishop, yeah. So that word is translated either bishop, overseer, and in my version, guardian, which is the same thing. The overseer is the guardian of the church. Other comments? Okay, I've stalled as long as I can. We're going to have to go to chapter 3.
No, I was gonna say, you mentioned our president like him or not, and I just hope that there's nobody, hope and pray there's nobody that wants him
To fail.
to die.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Can we just say there was an assassination attempt on his life last night, and
Oh, I didn't know that.
yes,
In the advance voting.
and.
I probably wouldn't have used that example if I knew that.
Well,
But
I mean.
absolutely.
It's just, like I
See,
said,
I got it.
we
Yeah.
got him, and
Oh.
it just, but still,
I didn't know that.
yeah, there
Appreciate it.
was third assassination.
And as I said last week, regardless of the party you're for, we are called to pray for the authorities.
Yeah, we're told to obey
Yeah.
the law, so.
The mayor's not here, but if, we respect the mayor. He says, don't put the trash in the street. You don't put your trash in the street.
I just don't want anybody really to
Yeah.
have those thoughts. It would make me sad,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
because that's not what we're supposed to do.
All right, chapter 2. So we've talked about submission. Chapter 3. Submission being the kind of life that God expected. He said, in your dealing with government, be submissive. In your dealing with your employer or your master, be submissive. Here's our example, Jesus Christ. It wasn't fair, but he went to the cross, submitting to the death on the cross. That's the example. Now we're going to turn to wives. Yes.
When you're thinking about that submission, I had a passage in Luke 24 when Jesus was on the cross. That verse that was mentioned, verse 23, about how he didn't revile when he suffered, and he committed himself to him that judgeth righteously. So this just proves that point about his submission. When Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said this, he gave up the ghost. So
Yeah.
it shows his submission to his Father. That's what we're
Yeah,
talking about.
exactly. He is our perfect example. Okay, so Rusty, you want to read 1 through 6.
Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives. When they see you are respectful in your conduct, do not let your adorning be external, braiding of hair, or not putting on a gold
All right, so, again, everything in the Bible is not necessarily popular in the world's view of how things should be. But as God had talked about order in society, following government, order in the workplace, if you will, following whoever is your master, he's also talking about order in the family. And so, who is this addressed to is the first question. It's addressed to wives. And that is where a lot of men get off base, because it's not addressed to us. We're never told to be the boss of our wife. Never. Women are told to let men be the spiritual, material leader of the family. In the sense that God asks for leadership, that's the leadership that's on men. Wives aren't told to make known in the past. Where their husband was not faithful, yet they, through the years, learned, there's something good about this that I need to be a part of through the life that they live. And so it's not a stretch of this to say, even though your husband is not an unbeliever, it definitely, you live the life that you should, you are encouraging him to be a stronger believer. You're making him a better person because of the way you live your life. I can certainly testify that in my own life. I was made a better person because of my wife. And most men, if they're honest, I would say that's true. You look at many, many churches, and there are more women than there are men. There are more faithful women than there are faithful men. I don't know why that is, but it is a truth that you see in many, many places. And so the duty of the wife is to be an example to the husband so that they can become a better Christian. Other comments anybody wants to make? Feeling confidence in Becky in here?
Well, it may be in church that goes to women and respecting men that they pass on the age things. A woman is a woman, man.
Yeah. You ruined my illustration by normal physical lifespan, but yeah. So we have a duty to the Christian wife, and he gives a reason that we can encourage the spiritual well-being of the husband. And it's a behavior, it talks about it always being chaste and respectful is the words that were used in my version. It talks about imperishable qualities of a gentle and quiet spirit. There's two conditions you can be. You can be imperishable, or you can be perishable. Everything in this, we think of a rock, we think it's imperishable, but in reality, everything in creation that's physical is what? It's perishable. It's going to pass away. No matter how solid you think it is, it's, you see these old houses that have lasted a long time, and then ultimately all you see left is the chimney. There's the chimney made of rock. Ultimately, what's going to happen to the chimney? It's going to fall down. So, there are things that are perishable, temporary in this life. There's temporary beauty. A young woman usually is more beautiful in a physical sense than when she gets older. Do what? What'd you say? Yeah, exactly. I'm on thin ice here, but some beauty is perishable, but he's talking about a chaste and respectful. Chaste. Nothing indecent in their behavior or their dress, and everything respectful to others. Other comments there? Yes.
Well, I was thinking back on the submissive verse, I mean, that's why we need to teach our young girls. It's so important to teach them to pick the right spouse,
Yeah.
Yes.
so that they don't get one that misunderstands the verse.
Thank you.
Because, I mean, it can make a huge difference, but we don't
Yep.
emphasize that more and more.
Yeah, go ahead, I was getting
That's
distracted.
okay. That's all I.
Yes, to teach them
Yeah.
these things. And it, you know, it's easy to get the wrong, it's easy to go about it the wrong way when you're looking for a spouse, to look to that external beauty. But you better check out that internal beauty. As, what was it? Teresa told me, somebody told her, when you're looking for a husband going to Harding, go to church Wednesday night and see who's there. Because there are a lot of Sunday morning Christians, but there are not as many Wednesday night Christians. And, you know, that's a simple thing to say, but, you know, there's a little truth to that. Gary, do you have a point?
Well, you know, in both sexes, beauty is only skin deep. You gotta look for the heart.
Yeah.
And when
So we're certainly looking for, he's looking for that beauty that is inward. And you don't have to search long in your mind to think of people, and I hate to use examples, so I'll use examples of people who aren't here. Carol McCormick, just a quiet, gentle person. She would sit right here, that's why I'm pointing right here, and she'd whisper just the perfect comment to whatever I was talking about. And I'd have to repeat it out loud because she wouldn't say it loud enough for you to hear it. So, just a gentle spirit, something that's admirable. I think of my mom. For those of you who knew my mom, and I said I wasn't going to use any examples, but Benton's mom. I'll use his mom as an example. She's shaking her head no. But,
Opal kid,
do what?
Opal kid.
Opal Kid. Okay, you can just think of examples in your mind of people that meet this condition. And I'm not saying they're unattractive. I'm saying their attractiveness as a person was greater than their attraction as a human being, a physical person. Yes, Rusty.
I don't know too many people here in the church, but I can tell you, my prayer warrior from Vicksburg, she had a gentle spirit. She was a very accommodating person, always encouraging everyone.
Exactly.
She had her father's eyes.
She's demonstrating exactly what we're reading here. Okay, then I also wanted to note here, there is an order in the institutions that God created for us to be in, and that is the home and the church. Does it say anything in here about the business world? Is there anything wrong for me having a boss who's a woman and listening and submitting to whatever she's asking me to do? Is there anything wrong with having a Prime Minister, Thatcher, in England that runs the country? Or, heaven forbid, we get a woman president. Just kidding, just kidding. In every area other than this, there is nothing that says in the Bible anywhere. There's nothing in the Bible anywhere that said if Teresa had owned a business that it would have been wrong for me to work for her, and in that business relationship submitted to everything she told me to do. You know, it's just not there. And if you try to find it, and you do find it, I wish you would share it with me, because I don't want to talk out of turn of what the Bible says. But in the church and in the family, God set up an order that he wanted to be followed. Just like in society, the government you submit to. We see that if you would turn, it's really yes.
You submit as long as what they're asking you to do is correct.
You are absolutely right. Just like we said with the government, the government may want me to do something immoral, or, an example in recent history is a bakery, I think it's in Colorado or somewhere, that wanted to not make a wedding cake for a homosexual marriage. So I'll bake you anything else you want, but I'm not going to do a wedding cake. Well, they get sued over that. That's the government enforcing something that's immoral. You can't participate. Same with your husband or your boss at work. If they ask you to do something immoral, they ask you to do something against the will of God, you can't go along with that. That's a perfect point. Stan, would you look Colossians 3 and read 18 through 21? And Benton, would you look up 1 Timothy 2? We're going to read 11 through 14. All right, so this is what God says about the family.
Wives, submit to your own husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be bitter toward them. Children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well pleasing to the Lord. And fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged.
All right. In this society, how many divorces would there be if every family followed this exact pattern? There would be none. There is duty placed on each. Husbands, love your wife. In Ephesians, it says, as Jesus loved the church. Okay, that's an extreme love. That's the love that says, I will lay down my life for you. And if I'll lay down my life for you, I'll also lay down every day for you. I'll give up my will to help you. So that is how the church, how the family, that's not how business is run. If the boss wants to be a bossy boss in business, he can do it. God doesn't talk about that. But he says, in the family, this is the way I want it to be. And then Benton, if you'll read.
1 Timothy 2:11 through 14.
Yes.
Let the woman learn in silence with all subjection, but I suffer not a woman to teach nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. For Adam was first formed, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression.
Okay, an order that he's expecting in the church. We see the same thing in 1 Corinthians. We won't read there, but it's similar thing in the church. There is an order. In God's kingdom, always there's been an order. Adam, he goes all the way to first. Adam was created first, then woman. But you look throughout the Old Testament. You had Abraham. It didn't start with Sarah. It started with Abraham. He was the father of the righteous. You had judges. The majority of them were men. There was an exception, Deborah. But if you read the story of Deborah, you'll see that when the enemy came, Barak was expected to lead the children of Israel's army against them, and he chickened out and said, I'll only go if you'll go with me. He was expected to take that leadership role. He didn't, and if you remember the story, the general ended up being killed by a woman. It's actually not even a Jewish woman. It was another tribe or whatever, and that's how the general was killed. It was given into the hands of this woman because the man didn't stand up and do the job that God asked him to. Even though Deborah was the judge, she was set up as the judge. There was a leadership expected of men. Even in that situation, you see the church. It says there's elders. What does it say? They're the husband of one wife. It doesn't ever say they're the wife of one husband. Yes?
Back where you were saying, we had to obey our bosses and all that. When I was on a missile site in Alaska, we got a bomb threat called in. I said, "Is this real?" Or is it, just practice, whatever.
Yeah.
And I said, "No, this is a real one." I said, and they said, I was either a sniper or the M60 gunner, and they told me to grab the M60, and I said, "Okay, I'm loading it when I get out there." And that's when I had to go to the boss's office. Because every time I couldn't load it, because we had seals on the ammo and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, "You're telling me this is real?" And anybody with any kind of knowledge knows if the belt's not in the gun, it's unloaded.
It's not going to work.
Yeah, we argued till it was over.
You might not have been submissive there.
But
But he was not making sense.
you're right, exactly.
Yeah. And they don't always make sense. The husbands don't always make sense. But there's a way that God said a family should operate. There's a way the church should operate. Yes,
And
Stan?
I'm really thinking about this Colossians that I just read, and I've read that many times.
Yeah.
18 and 19, wives submit, that husbands love your wives. When you do those two things, 20 is, when your children see the way that you treat your wife and the way she treats you
Yeah.
and the way you raise your kids, when your kids see that, they understand better, what they're supposed to do.
Exactly,
And
yeah.
then 21 is what I always struggle with when my children were little, because I always try to separate discipline, how hard can I be on them to keep them from being discouraged?
Yes.
Okay?
Discouraged.
It
It is hard.
My dad was hard on us, and I was just as hard on my children, and, we had our own little struggles in high school and things, but,
Yep.
I always struggle with that, because I'm like thinking, how hard can I be on them, just from the discipline?
Yeah, exactly. And not go over my version, I think, says exasperate. I think that's such a good,
Yeah, I look back on our daughter, I'm glad I didn't let up.
Yeah.
I kept the hammer down all the way through high school, and so anyway, it turned out good. So.
All right, so any other comments? That's a great one. It's hard to know that balance.
I was just thinking about all this, if we read God's word like it's speaking to me, not to my wife, not to my kids,
Exactly.
not to somebody else, then, we get things in the right order. Whenever I read it and think, well, I gotta make my wife do what she's supposed to do, or my, whoever,
Exactly,
in line.
yeah.
But if I live the kind of life, like he says here, if I subject myself to the Lord, if I'm working like I'm thinking I'm working for God, then there's not any issues.
That's a
Because
great
my
point.
boss is gonna see that, hey, what's with this guy? He's
Yeah.
done above and beyond what I asked of him to do, because he's something's different, so.
It's our temptation in everything. We look at our brothers and sisters and we think, well, they're not doing their job. Why do I have to do it all? Is that the submission that God is asking for? No, it's like you say, Ben, read it and say, what does it say to me? That's like when you listen to the sermon, how often are you thinking, well, I hope Benton is listening real good to this one. It's like, you're the one that needs to be listening. And that's where we get the next instruction, which we'll read the verse and we'll discuss it next week. But there's a lot in this, there's more verses on the women. I don't know why, but there is a whole lot in this one short verse that we as husbands should be paying attention to. 3 verse 7, Rusty. Do you want to read chapter 3 and verse 7?
Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, so as they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered.
Okay. So our prayers may not be hindered. When we look at all of this instruction, It's talking about our relationship with God. So, our relationship with our husband, if we're a wife, that reflects, or that can interfere with, or it can enhance our relationship with God. And it can enhance my husband's relationship with God, or it can hinder it. And that's the decision that we face every day in how we deal in our family relationships. And we can extend it to our family relationships as a church. How, as Ben was saying, how do we take the instruction? Do we take it as Jesus, that I'll do anything for you to the point of going to the cross? Or do we do it as my personal temptation is, it's not fair. Somebody else needs to do a little more. That's the choice that we face. So we'll talk about husbands next week. Yeah, week to think about it. I was thinking, can I get sick next week and somebody else have to teach that one? That would shut them off.